institute.org, or post them in the chat room, and Anastasia will make sure they get to me. Now, there's so much going on in the world, an incredible picture between war, depression, bank collapses, empty promises from people like Fed Chair Jerome Powell. But I want to start with one that I think is at the center of things, which is the contrast between the speech given by President Putin for the Victory Day celebration in Moscow and the continued efforts of the NATO, European Union, US political establishment to keep this war going, turning it into a permanent war. Putin's speech to the Victory Day celebration was honoring those who fought as allies in World War II to defeat the Nazis. And then he was sharply critical of the Western oligarchs today who are acting in the same way the Nazis did in World War II. But then, and critical of Western oligarchs by name. But when you talk about Western oligarchs, we had this spectacle of a press conference of British Foreign Secretary Cleverly meeting with Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, where Cleverly said, look, even if there aren't gains or significant gains in the current spring offensive, we're going to stick with Ukraine. We have to stick with Ukraine. Blinken, when he was discussing the leaks from the Pentagon, said, well, those leaks are back in March. Things are much different now. Ukraine is in much better shape. In other words, a commitment to permanent war. And Biden yesterday announced another either 1.2 or 1.4 billion in aid, dollars in aid to Ukraine. So Helga, what are your thoughts on this situation right now and the contrast between Putin's appeal to a human race fighting against corruption and for justice, and the continued war talk coming from Washington and European capitals?
Well, on the one side, naturally, it's very dangerous, but on the other side, it's also a coloss on clay feet. I mean, in a certain sense, you know, whenever you're talking about the British right now, I don't get the picture out of my head of this royal wedding. You know, actually, if you want to know how outdated this policy is, just look at this ceremony with an unhappy-looking King Charles and an even more unhappy-looking Queen Camilla. I mean, this was a medieval farce. You know, this is, and it, you know, with it goes a denial of reality, because you know they keep saying that, you know, Ukraine will win this war. We just have to send more weapons. I mean, the reality is that the Pentagon leaks made it very clear the poor Ukrainian people are being slaughtered. They are being used up until the last Ukrainian. And the reason why this much discussed Ukrainian spring offensive is not really visible is because you can pump as many weapons into Ukraine, but the fact is there is a demographic reality. You know, sure, you can send mercenaries, pilots and so forth, but you know, the West is really not that strong. I mean, the underlying weakness is the collapse of the financial system. The US banking crisis is fully going on. You know, the reason why they can't send enough ammunition is because, you know, they did too much deindustrialization to even keep a war going. So, I mean, it's all, you know, naturally it has a lot of human sacrifices and human collateral damage, as they call it, but it is not a winning proposition. So I think that, you know, the sooner more people come and stand up and say this has to stop, the better. You know, the military parade in Moscow, I watched part of it, and you know, the Western media, again, they say, oh, they didn't show tanks, they didn't show this. But frankly, you know, people better should have looked at the ICBM nuclear-loaded missiles. This is what will ruin the world civilization if we don't get out of this dynamic. So in a certain sense, I find these discussions of Blinken cleverly, you know, in a certain sense, yeah, sure, they re-emphasize the special relationship, the undying brotherhood between the US and Great Britain. But it's not a winning proposition, and it is definitely not the thing which will shape the future in any positive way. So, in a certain sense, it's talk of a past dying empire.
Now, you mentioned you referred to the banking crisis. We do have a question from a retired banker from Texas who has been following us for years. And in his comments, he said, I remember LaRouche talking about restoring Glass-Steagall many, many years ago. I was for it then. I'm not so sure right now. And he asks, what makes you so certain that in this era of AI, digital currencies, and internationalization, what makes you so certain that Glass-Steagall could work?
Well, because it's the only way how you get back to the providing of credit to the physical economy. I mean, people argue that you need derivatives, but derivatives originally were only meant as an insurance for actual, trade, not derivative upon derivative upon derivative, not this whole casino economy which has evolved out of it, where monetarist values are being, they have basically taken on a life on their own. So we have to go back to an original idea that you need credit to finance production. That's it. You don't need an elaborated system of financial tradings. And, the majority of countries are, as a tendency, moving in that direction already, because, countries like China are prohibiting speculation in monetary values. They discourage investment in these things by making specific laws. So I think, the AI has no impact on it, because it's a question of governments making legislation which, basically protects the common good. If you don't manage to go in this direction, then you end up in a dark age and possible World War III. So I think Glass-Steagall is as valid as it always was. And, the idea of having capital control on the part of some countries is de facto already doing the same thing.
Okay, now we have a question from Goleng Zeng, who says, the American economy looks like it's collapsing soon. The high inflation does not seem to be going away, yet the government still has the money, has the ability to send Ukraine more aid. Can the citizens afford to pay for that? And when will this money to Ukraine be too much for the common citizen?
Well, when the common citizen has enough of having not adequate infrastructure, of not having adequate transportation, of being sick and tired of the mass shootings in the United States, which are a result of a general economic and cultural collapse. I mean, the United States is in a terrible condition. Maybe you don't see the connection between the mass shootings and, the general condition of society, but why is it that so many children, so many people are driven to the point of committing these kinds of acts of insanity? It is because the society is no longer functioning. And I think the moment has to come where the ordinary citizen not only says, that the money which is being wasted now on the military-industrial complex, the only people who get rich are those who own these factories or these firms of the military-industrial complex. But people have to demand that the United States is being rebuilt. The roads in some parts of the United States are horrible. If you drive with a car in New Jersey, on the opposite side of Manhattan, it's a miracle that people are not running into mass accidents every hour, because the condition of the roads is so poor. There is not one fast train track in the United States, not one. I mean, the United States is in urgent demand for repair. And I think, the American people must really get their act together and demand a change.
Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and weekly magazine, which is what I read to stay on top.